the Standard. And to my right, we have guest host, the deputy, no longer the deputy, actually, the head honcho, the sheriff, the oracle, Dave Schofield, who'll be joining me today. Welcome to the program, Dave.
Lance, I think this is maybe our second show ever, just the two of us. I don't know.
Maybe. I know we've done a lot of shows. We did a bunch of draft shows.
Yeah.
I think I maybe hopped on but yeah, I think this is one of the few rare occasions where it's just been me and you. And remissfully, if I didn't say that you're tuning into The Standard is the Standard, you are tuning into The Standard is the Standard. And before we jump into the program, I also want to give a big shout out to Brian Anthony Davis, to Tony Defio, to Big Bro Sco, to everybody who contributes on the podcast side, as well as everybody who writes articles. Also want to give a big shout out to all of you who waited patiently in the live chat. And, we're teasing you guys. I mean, we're teasing you guys in the live chat. We want to get you, we want to let the live chat kind of fill up. It's sort of with the same thought of, you don't want to start a concert with 5 people in the stands. You just kind of want to make, let people get a little antsy, build some anticipation, get your snacks, your beer, so you're ready when the show. So as soon as we peek out from the curtain, we look out and we see some more people. So I want to thank you guys for being patient and staying in the waiting room and waiting for us to come on. And big up to you also, Erica J. That is a new name on the live chat. And so another way you can help us with the program, hit the super chat feature if you so care to do. That'll get your question to the top of the queue. And please hit the like button. And right now we are about 250 subscribers on the YouTube side from 6,000. I have a birthday coming up on June 18th. Please give me a great birthday present by being the 251st person so we can get to 6K. That'll be quite an accomplishment. And it all is from you. And we want to thank you guys. And I want to thank everybody who contributes on the BTSC side and the podcast side. We bring the show for you. And thank you for coming. So the title of this particular program, and I will admit, this is a sugar-free Cool Whip show. And you guys might be asking, what is a sugar-free Cool Whip show? That's a low-calorie guilty pleasure show. Right now, I think we can all agree there's not a lot of content out there. It's not a lot of content out there. It's June. We're in a pandemic. We have social unrest all over the country. Not a lot of topics. There's not a lot of to talk about on the NFL side. So when we find ourselves in situations like this, we come up with sugar-free Cool Whip shows, meaning low-calorie guilty pleasures. And the title of this particular program, but I had a couple of questions for Dave before we jump into it, because there is a little bit of NFL news, is who is the best drafted Steeler player of all time? Now, I asked a few people. I put it on Twitter. This is a tough question because, of course, when you win 6 championships, you draft quality players. I mean, you're talking about a 1974 draft where they drafted 4 Hall of Famers in 5 rounds, which is unquestionably the best draft class in history. But I want to break it down and get you guys' opinion as to who is the best all-time draft pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. But before that, there was some news. The NFL is looking to shorten the preseason. What's your thoughts on that? And what do you think the impact would be for rookies and or for teams across the National Football League?
Well, Lance, this is a tough one because just the way the whole offseason's been so far is already going to be impacting the rookies this fall, let alone the work time. The problem is, if they're going to shorten the preseason, well, first of all, I'm assuming that means that the Hall of Fame game would have to go, because if they're going to shorten, I mean, unless they're going to stretch out the preseason and to, and do 2 games in 4 weeks, I don't see how they're going to pull off a game on August 6th and then say, we're not going to start the preseason for 2 more weeks after that. Or maybe they bump it back 2 weeks. And then they still have the Steelers doing 3 preseason games. I don't know how they do that, but honestly, I have a question I'm going to ask back to you about this when we're done talking about it. I'm okay with the 2 preseason games because I'd rather them take the time to figure it out and get it done right for playing football in stadiums, whether it be in front of no fans or a couple fans, and get the procedures right that they know that they're going to do. If it takes longer to get that done where they don't have as many games to do it, I'm okay with that if that's what it takes to get to the regular season. I think it is going to hurt the development of some of these younger guys, but with the Steelers, one of those teams coming in with no first-round draft pick and no one that they're asking to step right in right away and be a massive contributor, it could actually maybe help them a little bit more compared to, well, not help them, not hurt them as much as other teams, if you know what I mean. But my question back to you, Lance, is this whole notion of going to only 2 preseason games kind of that almost the NFL doing a little test run that they might, because they're wanting to reduce the preseason games in the future when they add more regular season games?
I think that is something that well, nothing is done in the NFL happenstance, right? If you reduce the preseason, I think you're absolutely right on that point. It'll be as a way to figure out how to reduce it to add more games. Mm-hmm. And I think they'll couch it with the fact that if we reduce the preseason games, we're reducing the number of end games overall, which reduces the number of opportunities that you can get hurt playing football. And why would you get hurt in a meaningless preseason game? That'll be how they sell it. So I love that point. But I thought you brought up a great point. I think they're going to use the preseason as a testing ground to figure out how they're going to manage COVID-19 if they decide to have fans back in the stands. Yeah. So someone is going to be the sacrificial lamb, so to speak, for bad football, for the management of, or coming up with the safety protocol around having fans in the stands. Now, me personally, preseason football is terrible. Now, when you add a pandemic into preseason football, then that's absolutely unwatchable and undoable. But I think you are correct when you assert that they're going to use the preseason as a possible testing ground for figuring out a safety protocol. And with that being said, the other thing, and I think it's a great segue into the other question I was going to ask you is, from all intents and purposes, from everything I've read today, the Hall of Fame game is moving forward.
Yeah.
And they're going to have it, and they anticipate having fans and doing everything that they normally do at the Hall of Fame game and with the Hall of Fame proceedings. And they're operating as if there is no pandemic and everything is going to go and move as it did in the past. What's your thought about that? I thought that was kind of interesting that in a game in which none of those proceeds, correct me if I'm wrong, go towards the league or players.
I couldn't tell you that.
I don't think it's an official game when it comes to revenue. Mm-hmm. It just seems weird that you would take that chance for a game that's all for intents and purposes meaningless.
Well, it's interesting, Lance, because different places in the country are different phases. I know you're in a place that's just been really hit hard with everything with COVID, and it's tough for anything.
We've opened up everything.
Oh, really?
Almost everything is open now. So now it's like floodgates, right?
Well, here in Maryland, they just announced today that they're going to, we have outdoor seating for restaurants right now, but they're going to move to some limited indoor seating for restaurants starting Friday evening. And the next week, they're going to open up malls, gyms, arcades, things like that. So it's going to be interesting to see. We're either going to see that, well, maybe we need to pull stuff back. We might be going a little bit too far, a little bit too fast, or they might say, hey, you know what? We've really crossed over and we can get moving with all that. What I think is interesting with all this, Hall of Fame game aside, well, if they cut 2 preseason games, I think that would give the Hall of Fame the option of moving everything back 2 weeks, which could be beneficial and still having it.
Yes.
So, but just to say, well, since the NFL shortened it, we don't want teams to play 2 weeks before they have another game. But if you're talking about it being August 6th And then you're talking about 2 more weeks on that. So you're talking, it would be August 20th. That kind of also gives you an idea of how are things working, a little bit more idea of how things work with the NHL, with their plan coming back. How's things going with Major League Baseball? What's going on with the NBA? They could get more data by cutting 2 preseason games and have a little bit more data from those other professional sports and kind of let them see what's going on in order for them to make it better for the NFL. Just something that I thought there.
I mean, just from all that we've said, and thank you to Sean Manahan who gave a $2 super chat.
I was going to bring those up. First, we had Dave Shipley put $2 in the tip jar. No comment there, but just $2 to the show. And then here's the one from Sean, right? Is that the other one? Yeah.
Yes.
Go ahead. You can address that.
When it comes to the 46 to 53, it's I have a hard time answering these questions because I find that I'm making assumptions around who those people are.
Mm-hmm.
And because I can't really identify who those people are, I don't know if the preseason hurts them or not. So I'll answer it in general. The more snaps you have to play, the more opportunity, as a coach would say, you can show your wares, the better. It can't hurt you in a preseason game, whether it's the Hall of Fame game or not, or if you play 5 games to where you put quality film on the field. So it'll help you whether that means you're going to play for the Steelers or you're going to play for someone else. Quality snaps are quality snaps. The more you put on tape, and if you can show you can ball, you're going to play ball for somebody. So cutting games will hurt people on the bottom half of the roster. I just don't know how much it impacts particular players because I don't know who those players are.
I think I'm going to say probably at most 10 guys per team. Meaning the last 5 on the 53 and the first 5 off the 53.
Yeah.
And some teams that might only be 2 one way, each way that they're worried about. But I don't know that it's really much more than 5. Look at the Steelers. Do you really think that there's more than? At this point there might be, but even after the first few weeks of practice, you're going to get a much better idea who that is. But at the same time, if you're not getting a lot of film out there, it's going to be tougher for those guys to get picked up on somebody else's 53, but it might be easier for the Steelers to get them onto their practice squad. So it's give and take both ways. You're looking at from the player trying to get into the league. But especially for some of these rookies, practice squad might be good, but if they're not going to have much other playing time.
Yeah, it's going to be this is a brave new world for professional sports in North America. And that's why this particular show, again, is a sugar-free Cool Whip show. We are giving you a low-calorie, guilty pleasure show. And I want to apologize to Wayman Johnson. He posted everything is not open last gym. Several restaurants, industrial, and small shops are still closed. He is correct. There are some gyms that are still closed, but mostly everything is starting to open up in my area. I can go to the mall in my area. So,
oh really?
I still don't once the mall,
I don't go to the mall anyway.
I don't go to the mall anyway, but you can go to the mall and get froyo. So once you can get froyo out, it's almost a sign that there's supposedly nothing going on. But let's jump into the topic at hand. The best all-time Steelers draft pick. Now, we're going to start from 5 to 1. Now, there's no criteria for how you pick or put individuals on your list. This is just a guilty pleasure show. You can argue it any way you want. Value, era, position, stats. It could just be because you like their jersey number. It doesn't matter.
That makes me feel better.
It could be any particular reason that you've put these 5 players. Now, I've asked, I think 5 individuals, and I've got different number ones. I think you guys are going to be surprised at my number 1 overall pick. But it could be anybody. It could be anything. So I've asked several people. So I want to start with you, Dave.
Okay.
Who is your number 5 all-time best Steelers draft pick?
Okay, I'm going to give the disclaimer to the whole list. And that is, you could easily convince me to change my entire list by the time the show is over, because this was difficult and I don't have a ton of confidence in this. So I really narrowed it down to 8 to then try to get to 5. And that was tough. That was tough. But what I went with is I put someone at number 5 because some of the things I was looking at, they were in the top of all these things. I went in, did some research. You look up like the All Pros, you look up the Pro Bowls, you look up. Actually, Pro Football Reference has this thing that they just call, I think it's called average value, AV, and they even have it for someone's career. It's their own measurement. It's just a random number measurement. You have to go in and try to look up exactly how they put into it. But in other words, the higher the AV, the better they are. I took the highest AV guy for the Steelers that was drafted by the Steelers, and that's my number 5. And the part of the reason I do that is because he had some of his career. He had 6 Pro Bowls, but one of them was not with the Steelers. My number 5 is Rod Woodson.
Now leave it to you to look up an obscure stat. And that's why we love you. That's why you are the stat geek, the oracle. You looked up a stat called AV.
Yeah, it's honestly, it's a judgment call by Pro Football Reference that they basically are giving grades to players per season if they had a good season, and then it builds from there. It's I can't back it up scientifically at all. It's just kind of taking someone else's opinion, if you know what I mean.
Now, before I give you my number 5 pick, excuse me, and I had to look up the Spanish word for happy, which I think is contento. Please correct me if you are in the live chat. So, Wayman, I am sorry, but there are no contento endings available for you in California as of yet. You will have to wait a couple of weeks for that because he was upset that he could not get a massage. My number 5 overall top draft pick of all time for the Steelers, Mean Joe Green. I'm putting Mean Joe Green at number 5. And people are going to say that's sacrilegious because for most people, Mean Joe Green is the best Steeler of all time. And for me, I think Mean Joe Green is the best Steeler of all time. But when I think of draft picks, you have to attribute value to a pick. Mm-hmm. But when you think of the Pittsburgh Steelers, you think of 6 championships, you think of the Steel Curtain. And when you think of the Steel Curtain, not everybody thinks of the 4 defensive linemen. A lot of people think of the Steel Curtain and they put one face as the picture of the curtain, and that's Joe Green.
Yeah.
They think of the Coke commercial when Joe Green is beat up in a game in the locker room and a little kid gives him a Coca-Cola. I know that's my image of Joe Green, and I have several Joe Green jerseys, so it was painful for me to put Joe Green at number 5. Let me give you the top 5. Let me give you number 5 from a couple other people. Friend of the program, Ian Whetstone, put Troy Polamalu at 5. Mm-hmm. Chris Carter of DK Sports, friend of the program, put Big Ben at 5. Nick Farabaugh put Terry Bradshaw at 5, friend of the program as well. My dad, I got to throw Pops in here too. Pops put Mike Webster at 5. So again, this shows you the difficulty of coming up with this list because it's all over the place. Yeah. So let's jump to number 4. Give me your number 4 guy.
My number 4 guy was a guy that did not show up very high on that AV stat at all. He wasn't even in the top 10. Doesn't have the Pro Bowls that others do. Doesn't have the All Pros that others do. But when you're talking about someone that really made a difference when they were drafted, especially when it was the only time, it's the last time the Steelers ever drafted number 1 overall, you got to go with Terry Bradshaw being in the top 5. So I have him at number 4.
You can't argue against Terry Bradshaw. I mean, 4 Super Bowls, the value of the quarterback position. I mean, as much as we all laud the drafting of Joe Green, and many people cite that as the start and the cornerstone of the franchise, and that's when the franchise took the abrupt turn and became what we know as the Pittsburgh Steelers. the quarterback position is ultimately super important in terms of winning football games.
And
And
that's why I moved him up there. I'm like, he doesn't, it's hard for a quarterback to be all pro and things like
yes.
that. So I'm like, that position was so important. That was a really important pick.
So I could go with you there at 4. I could see that. Let me give you my number 4.
Okay.
I'm going with Mike Webster. And the reason I'm going with Mike Webster is because he was the 125th pick in the 5th round, the 4th Hall of Famer of the best draft class in history that included Lynn Swann, Stallworth, and Lambert, and arguably the best of those 3. If you're a 5th rounder and you become a Hall of Famer, the value of your pick is astronomical. Now, on top of that, they won 4 Super Bowls with him as the anchor of that offensive line, ran the ball effectively, and the running game was the staple of those teams. And also, this is a franchise that has Dermontti Dawson and Pouncey and Ray Mansfield, and he is arguably the best of all 3 of those centers. That's why I got to put Mike Webster at number 4.
I got you.
Mike was the man. I mean, Mike, unfortunately, Mike, his demise was very painful for Steeler Nation to watch, but Mike's a whale of a pick. Let me give you the number 4 from Ian Whetstone. He put Big Ben. I don't think you can argue with Big Ben. Chris of DK Sports put Troy Polamalu. Nobody can argue with Polamalu. And that's the beauty of this, is all of these guys that everybody is picking are very good, and most of these guys have gold jackets.
You've got like 12 guys to choose from.
Exactly. You got so many
really
guys.
Do.
I mean, Nick Faribault said Webster. He agreed with me. Excuse me, I left Bad out. Bad said Bradshaw at 5. He put Woodson at 4.
So we had the same thing, just in the opposite order as Bad.
Yes. My dad had Big Ben at number 4. Funny story with my dad. Do you remember the game where Big Ben, they beat Dallas, his rookie season? I think he threw a late touchdown pass, maybe in the corner of the end zone. I think it was a 4th quarter comeback. My dad called me within, maybe about 5 minutes of the end of that game and said, "Son, we got one. we got one.
Yeah.
We have our next guy. We've got one." Now, for my dad to give that guy, Ben Roethlisberger, the stamp after about 2 or 3 games, I was like, we must have one. Yeah. He was like, "Son, we've got one. Let's jump to number 3. Give me your number 3 all-time best pick."
Well, what's interesting is now we're getting all players that we've already talked about from somebody's list or another. My number 3, I was really torn of where to go with 3 and 4. And my number 3, it goes back to the first draft I ever watched play out, because there was a player that I wanted the Steelers to take, and I wanted them to take him. I wanted them to trade up, to get him, and they didn't have to. And it changed the franchise at the time, because the problem was they struggled so long without having a quarterback. And that is when they drafted one Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger out of Miami of Ohio. That's my number 3.
We agree. Yeah. We agree. Ben Roethlisberger is my number 3. I mean, and it goes back to, and you look at Ben Roethlisberger, of course, 1st round draft pick, number 13 pick in the draft. I believe he was picked after Eli, and who was the other quarterback drafted in front of him? And Phillip Rivers. And that was one of the best classes of quarterbacks. I think all 3 of those guys will be in the Hall of Fame.
Well, here's what's crazy about that draft, Lance. Both of the other teams, when it really came down to it, kind of wanted Roethlisberger more. Both the Giants and the Chargers. The Chargers took Eli Manning because they had the number 1 pick, and that was the consensus number 1. But they really liked Roethlisberger. Then, it was one of those things that it was like, well, do we want to take the small school guy? And it was almost like they liked him, but they needed to take the guys that everyone else said these are the guys. So all I know is that how different would the NFL be today if that awful team up on the lake would have actually made the right pick and kept Ben in state rather than going with Kellen Winslow. So once they took Winslow, because I'm like, oh, the Steelers got to trade ahead of the Browns. Once they took Winslow, I'm like, no one else needs him. He's coming to us. I'm just sitting back waiting. Just bring him. Just bring him.
And thank you for the correction. Deal with it. Ben Roethlisberger was the 11th pick overall, not the 13th pick. Just think of it, right? Just think of it, right? We would be in a world where the New England Patriots would have the most Super Bowl championships. Can you imagine? Okay, first of all, Patriot fans are absolutely obnoxious already. Can you imagine if Patriot fan was the only team with 6 Super Bowls? I already can't stand the Patriots already. My brother's a Patriot fan. The world is a better place there's a tie.
I mean, it's a butterfly effect. The Steelers don't get Roethlisberger because he goes to the Browns. I mean, the world could have ended because of this, Lance. I mean, there might not be an NFL, because the Steelers don't have Roethlisberger. That's how big of a deal this is. That's why it's my number 3. We should mention Snowman here, $5 in the tip jar.
He said,
how do you feel about that?
I could change my list at least a dozen times. This is why these shows are tailored like this, because they bring up a lot of discussion. And we're not talking about the Jacksonville Jaguars, man. Like, we have a lot of picks. There are a lot of great Steeler picks. And there's going to be a lot of guys that are never on the list. As I go through these names and I go through all the other guys that I asked about their picks, we haven't said Jack Lambert once or Jack Ham. We haven't said Lambert or Ham or Blunt.
Yeah.
Like, we haven't said those guys, right? So that's how many great players have been on. We haven't said L.C. Greenwood.
Well, you know what? We'll talk about all these once we get to our
that's how difficult this is, how this exercise was. And so we're just happy because it would be a pandemic if the Patriots had the most championships and the Steelers just had 4. It would be a pandemic. I can't imagine COVID-19 and the Patriots have the most championships alone. That would just be absolutely the apocalypse. So let me jump to number 3. Or excuse me, yes, actually number 2. So we did number 3. Before we jump to your number 3, Dave, let me give you the number 3 from the guys that we asked. Ian Whetstone said Mike Webster. It's a name that I came up with. Chris Carter came up with a name that has not been mentioned, John Stallworth. What do you think about Stallworth being in the top 5 of best overall draft picks?
Honestly, great pick, but you're talking about the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, we are spoiled as fans that we have this many options. You put John Stallworth, on 3/4 of any of the other franchises in the NFL, and he's definitely in the top 5. I don't know that I could go that far for him, but I don't want to say because I haven't said who my last 2 are yet. But that's interesting.
Now, Nick Faribault said Mr. 3rd and 5th, aka Gummy Richards.
Do you realize the last time you and I were on a show together, just the 2 of us, that is when that nickname was born, Mr. 3rd and 5th. So
Mr.
like
3rd
a little
and
reunion.
5th, Gummy Richards. So let's go to my dad's number 3 pick, Rod Woodson. That name has come up, and nobody can disagree with how good Rod Woodson was. In terms of bad came up. His number 3 pick was Big Ben. Let's jump into number 2. Give me your number 2 pick here. The second best overall draft pick in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers.
All right. Well, here's the thing with this. This is someone you've already talked about. This person I moved up more because of 2 different things. 1, draft value, and 2, games played for the Steelers. Right now, number 1 all time, but there's a good chance he could be passed by one Benjamin Todd Roethlisberger coming up. But you got to go with Mike Webster. I mean, what a steal to have such a player in the 5th round. I mean, it was amazing pick. You probably didn't think anything of it at the time. I wouldn't know. I wasn't alive yet. I know I like looking back at old articles about that famous 74 draft that people were ripping on it, that the Steelers didn't have a very good draft. That's the problem with draft grades, right? When the draft is done. So that you didn't realize what you had. That is not a pick that you thought anything of. The longer the time goes, even since he's retired and passed on, the more you appreciate that pick. And that's why I had to bump it all the way up to number 2.
Before I give you my number 2 pick, we have to give credit to Bill Nunn Sr. and his impact on the Steelers' ability to be as good as they were when they were drafting small college black ball players and so on and so forth, and just his contributions to the draft and the Steelers' success in the 70s. And there's no doubt that Bill Nunn Sr. should be a Hall of Famer, in my opinion. And I also want to send my condolences to the Nunn family, to Nunn Jr., because Bill Nunn Jr. is a very close family friend of my dad's. And so we knew the Nunns. And so, yeah, I hope that Bill Nunn Sr. gets his just due and becomes a member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame. If Gil Brandt is in the Hall of Fame, Bill Nunn Sr. should be in the Hall of Fame as well. Number 2 has to go with the golden boy, Terry Bradshaw. Number 1 pick overall, number 1 pick in the 1970 draft out of Louisiana Tech. I mean, what else can you say? The man won 4 Super Bowl championships. I mean, the Pittsburgh Steelers aren't the Pittsburgh Steelers without Terry Bradshaw. Those picks of Green on the defensive side of football and Terry Bradshaw, you don't make those 2 picks, we're the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Yeah.
There's no championships. And, as important as Green was on the defensive side of football, none of this happens without Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw was the gunslinger, one of the best arms of all time. Terry played big in big games. I mean, it was Terry Bradshaw. He couldn't sing. He was a bad country singer, but he was a whale of a quarterback. And if you were growing up in Pittsburgh at the time, you remember the relationship of him and JoJo Starbuck. It was the talk of the town, him and JoJo Starbuck. And he wanted to be a country singer. Glad he wasn't able to do that. We're glad as football fans, Steeler football fans, that he was able to slang that thing. So my number 2 is Terry Bradshaw. Terry Bradshaw is the second best all-time draft pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And here's the thing. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dave. All of your picks are gold jacket guys, or will eventually be gold jacket guys, correct?
Because the only one that's not is Roethlisberger, and he's going to be.
And he's going to be a gold jacket guy. Look at all
the gold jacket guys we had that we aren't even in the top 5 because they have so many.
Yes. I mean, Joe Green gold jacket, Webster gold jacket, Ben is going to be a gold jacket for me. Terry Bradshaw is going to have a gold jacket. He has a gold jacket. He has a gold jacket. You are absolutely correct. And that's why the Pittsburgh Steelers have 6 Super Bowls. A lot of people on the live chat, Wayman Johnson said Cam Hayward. That's an interesting one there. I don't know if Cam can crack the top 5. John Trent said Casey Hampton. Steelers fan 74 said Joe Green. Snowman asked the question, did anybody say Lynn Swann?
We're not done yet, are we?
We're not done yet. We're not done yet. We're not at number 1. No one has said Lynn Swann yet. No one has said Lynn Swann yet. So, and that's why this is so tough. Let me jump into the number 2 pick from Ian Whetstone. He said Mel Blount. And I didn't have Mel on my list. You didn't have Mel on your list.
Not yet.
Not yet. That's right.
I haven't seen the last one yet, so we don't know.
You could argue, in terms of importance, Mel Blount changed football. They changed the way you covered because of Mel Blount. You might as well call it the Mel Blount rule. And we all know the importance of cornerbacks, right? The Mel Blount rule. Chris Carter had Bradshaw at number 2. He agreed with me. I mean, I think that's self-explanatory. Nick Faribaugh had Joe Green at number 2. And, Joe Green pretty much, I mean, I didn't put Joe at 1 or 2. I put Joe at 5. Terry Bradshaw, my pops had Terry Bradshaw at number 2. Bad had Jack Lambert at number 2.
That doesn't surprise me.
Can a middle linebacker really be the second most valuable, best all time. I'm putting value in all. Can a middle linebacker be your second best pick of all time? Maybe if you're the Ravens and you say Ray Lewis, but is Ray Lewis a better draft pick than Jonathan Ogden? I mean, can a middle linebacker be your second best draft pick of all time?
I'm not saying it can't. I'm just saying if it is, at least he picked the right one. You know what I mean? Yeah. So, I mean, you could have that iconic guy. It's hard for me to judge all of these older ones because I didn't, I was born at the end of the 70s. I didn't get to see these players play. I just know what they meant to the franchise and to the history. So mine is more about that aspect than it was, seeing them live on the field, because all I've ever seen is tape.
Right. Well, at least he didn't pick Kendrell Bell.
That's true.
So I think I think if you pick a Hall of Famer, you're safe instead of picking Lev Kirkland, although LeVon Kirkland was a well of a player. He didn't pick Lev Kirkland. He did not pick Kendrell Bell. Two quality players. And you're talking about a Kirkland is that's another great player that we're not mentioning. But maybe we are mentioning because we have not gotten to our number one pick. So drum roll.
Okay. I'm going to count it down. I'm going to remind everybody.
You're going to count it down?
We've thrown out so many names with everybody. They might have forget who everybody said. So they may not remember who's left. So mine's going to be obvious because of who hasn't said yet. 5 was Rod Woodson. 4 was Terry Bradshaw. 3 was Ben Roethlisberger. 2 was Mike Webster. And I went with number 1 as the pick that changed the franchise.
Okay.
2-time Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay.
Mean Joe Green.
Okay. Nobody can argue with Mean Joe.
Yeah, because if that's the player that changed everything, that's when the change started to occur. You had Mean Joe on defense, then you got Bradshaw on offense, and boom, there they went. They just started to build and build and build. And honestly, if to most people, if you say Pittsburgh Steelers, one guy, there's a good chance they're going to say Mean Joe Green.
Absolutely. I mean, absolutely. And the superlative to describe, Mean Joe Green. You can run out of things to say. Mean Joe was just that guy. He's Mean Joe. It's like, it's Mean Joe. There are only 2 franchise retired numbers, and that's Ernie Stautner and Mean Joe Green.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. And we've talked about a zillion gold jacket guys.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about show enough gold jacket guys. Guys that were certified ballers, right?
Yeah.
And their numbers aren't retired. So when Joe Green was drafted in 1969, the Steelers did still go 1-13. They went from 1-13. Bradshaw was drafted. They went to 5-9. 1971, they went to 6-8. And the big jump was in 1972. So within a 3-season period from the drafting of Joe Green and Terry Bradshaw, they became a playoff team in 1973, the team that lost to the Dolphins. Then they went to 10-4, 10-3, 12-2, 10-4, 9-5, 14-2, 12-4. So post 1972, they were off to the races. So from 1972 to 1979, they won 4 championships. They won them in 1974, 1975. Then they won them in 1978, 1979. And that foundation was built and started with Joe Green. So
here's my question.
Joe Green has won. There's no argument from me.
Yeah. My question is this, and we'll never know the answer to this. If the Steelers don't get Joe Green in 1969 and still get Bradshaw, do they get the success that they get? Do they have more of that turnaround as they go without Joe Green? Even with Bradshaw, do they have that turnaround? I don't think so. And that's the whole reason I went Joe Green first, because those teams, not that they weren't good on offense, but it was the defense. It was the defense that made the difference.
I mean, they were so good defensively for almost a decade. I mean, they were just so good on defense. I mean, it was just, you're talking about their defense. I mean, they had Hall of Famers at every level of their defense. You're starting multiple Hall of Famers on your defense. I mean, you're starting a Hall of Fame corner. You're starting multiple Hall of Fame linebackers. You're starting a Hall of Fame defensive lineman and other guys that are almost equally as good as him. So they were dominant on that. You got Andy Russell. I mean, you just got great guys, and nobody has said Jack Ham once. And nobody has said Jack Ham, and Ham is arguably their best linebacker in their history. My dad will argue you till the cows come home that Ham is better than Lambert.
That's a tough one. They were both my honorable mentions. They were the two guys, honestly, numbers wise, they would have been on the list ahead of Roethlisberger and Bradshaw if you want to go by the average value and the Pro Bowls and the All Pros. But you have to weight that quarterback position, and that's what bumped those two guys off my list.
Now, let me go through my top five.
Before I get to can I say one thing to you, Lance? You know why the Steelers only won one game Joe Green's rookie year? 72. He was number 72 his rookie year. It wasn't until he became 75 that it really made the difference.
He wasn't really Joe Green. He was
that wasn't the real Joe Green.
He was Joe Blue. Joe Aqua. All right. Let me give you my top five. Let me recap it. Number 5, I had Joe Green. Number 4, Mike Webster. Number 3, Ben Roethlisberger. Number 2, Terry Bradshaw. And number 1, I have Mr. 3rd and 5th himself, Antonio Brown. Mr. Gummy Richards is my best all-time draft pick of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And here's the reason why.
I know you're going to say why, and I can understand it.
You're talking about a franchise that has Stallworth and Swan and Hines Ward. I will argue to you that Antonio Brown is better than all three of them. Antonio Brown's 5-year stretch is arguably the greatest 5-year stretch in the history of the National Football League. You wrap that with the fact that he's a 6th-round draft pick from Central Michigan, and the value and the production is absolutely off the charts. You put all that together, and I know he's crazy. He throws furniture off of balconies. He throws Gummy Richards at his baby mama's house. When the cops are coming, he's absolutely insane. But Antonio Brown is the best wide receiver of the Pittsburgh Steelers as a 6th-round draft pick. He's better than Ward. Well, he's better than Swan. He's better than Stallworth. And had he not been absolutely bat-ass crazy, hence the name Mr. Gummy Richards, Mr. 3rd and 5th, he would absolutely have a gold jacket. But he crazied himself out of Pittsburgh. But in terms of value, production, and dominance as a player, Mr. 3rd and 5th, Antonio Brown is the best overall draft pick in Steelers history.
Here's the reason I say that I completely get your point. And that is, if you were talking about value, I could totally see that, because you say he's a 6th-round pick. Well, you talk about, 6th-round picks back in the 70s. That was different. He was 195th overall.
Yes.
195th overall. So he is, in my opinion, arguably with Mike Webster, the best value pick that the Steelers ever had in the draft. So the question is, if you weigh value a lot, then I understand why you put him up there. It's funny. Our list, until you said him, was the inverse of each other. My 1 was your 5. My 2 was your 4, the whole way down until you said that one. So that's all about your criteria. That's what it comes down
Right.
to. If you're talking
Right.
about value, I can understand that. If you're just talking about, like someone said, no ring. Well, Rod Woodson, I had him at number 5, and he didn't have a ring with the Steelers either. So
Yes.
it's all in what you're looking at. It really is, because if you're going to weigh that immense value, it's crazy. Now, here's the question: do you realize that the Steelers got that draft pick via trade? That wasn't their original draft pick. They got, who was it? Bryant McFadden coming back to the Steelers.
Oh, okay.
They got him, and they got that draft pick. They got it from the Arizona Cardinals, who traded up. And in that draft pick, they selected John Skelton, quarterback. So so the Steelers traded back, got McFadden back. I'm pretty sure it was McFadden. Someone will tell me if I'm wrong. And then still got who was arguably the best wide receiver in the NFL in a 5-year stretch there before he went cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
Now, let me give you. Now, this is based on, I'm looking at the NFL value chart, and this is based on the 2006 draft. I know it's a long time ago, but I think the number that I'm going to give you just reflects, in terms of value, where Antonio Brown was. And in the 06 draft, the 195th pick was the 3rd pick of the top of the 7th round. And that's probably got pushed back due to compensatory picks or whatever. But that value pick, so the number 1 pick overall in the draft that year was worth 3,000 points. The 195th pick is worth 14.4 points.
That sounds about right.
14 points. So that basically says there is no value to a 6th round pick.
They're not even guaranteed to make the team.
They're not even guaranteed to make the team. That's why the best overall draft pick, and I hate to say this, the best overall draft pick in terms of value of all time is that guy that used to play up north in New England, Tom Brady. Who's he's the best overall draft pick of all time in the National Football League. Given what he's accomplished, he is arguably the GOAT player. 6 Super Bowl championships. What they've won, they've gone to like 30 Super Bowls since he's been playing, and he's going to get his head beat in by Bruce Arians. He's too old to play in that system. But let me before we jump into the Super Bowl.
What do you think of this comment real quick? That he said about Antonio Brown, this is from Sean. He said he may have been the best talent of all time, but they doesn't think he's the best player. Do you understand what they're saying there?
Talent is one of those amorphous things. It kind of means difference to, it's hard to say. It's one of those things.
That's a tough one.
That's a tough one. Let me give you my.
That's why it's your list.
Let me give you Ian's number 1 overall. Ian Whetstone, friend of the program.
Can you count them down for him real quick?
So he had Troy, Big Ben, Webster, Blunt, and AB.
He had AB number 1.
He had AB number 1.
He doesn't even have Joe Green in the top 5. Ian, my goodness.
He had Chris Carter had Big Ben, Troy Polamalu, Stallworth, Bradshaw, Joe Green. Nick Farabaugh had Bradshaw, Webster, Brown, Green, and Big Ben.
Oh, you know Big Ben.
I don't know if I could put Big Ben.
He's a young guy.
He's a young guy. I don't know if I could put Big Ben number 1. My pops had Webster, Big Ben, Woodson, Bradshaw, and Joe Green. And Bad had a controversial, Bad meaning Brian Anthony Davis. Who's Bad? He had Bradshaw, Woodson, Big Ben Lambert, and Franco Harris as his best overall draft pick of all time.
Franco was another guy on my radar. Polamalu was on my radar. Dermontti Dawson was on my radar. Alan Faneca was on my radar. Of all those guys there, because of some of the numbers and great things they did. You just gotta, to me, you went with value, and I understand you went with value. It's funny, like my brother said in there. He said, "Lance, your list was great until you got to number 1." I didn't expect that from you for number 1. And if you're thinking value,
yes,
you keep throwing that out there. I think of I'm going to make up a word, legendariness. How legendary are they?
Makes sense to me.
That's what I did with the top 5. And so it's all in how you're thinking. It's all in how you're thinking. But I think the overall consensus, more people put Joe Green at number 1 than anyone else.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, absolutely.
And bad doesn't even have him on the list. Bad. What are you thinking?
Yeah, that's a bad list. Can we just say if Joe Green's not on your top 5, that's a bad list? I want to kick bad a little bit. Is that on your bad list? Is that a bad list? No Joe Green.
Because Franco was great. But the thing is, with the Steelers, and you had the Immaculate Reception. You changed so much stuff with the Steelers. But do you think the Steelers still would have been okay without Franco?
I think so. But Franco's in the airport, though. When you go to the man mover, when you go to Pittsburgh and you go to the man mover, you're seeing Franco in Immaculate Reception.
If you say Franco, Bradshaw, and Joe Green, who is value over replacement? We talk about that as something all the time. They're like, how valuable are you over what it would be to replace you on the field? That's why I didn't want the Steelers to overpay for Le'Veon Bell, because I didn't see his value over replacement at the time. I'm going to say at the time.
Yes.
Okay. Because we're still trying to figure that out.
Right.
So, and that's the big thing is, I think out of those 3, no disrespect to Franco, I think he was the most replaceable of those 3 players.
I would agree. And see, this is tough because Sean Manahan said my criteria had to have a gold jacket and at least 1 Super Bowl championship. I can't knock that. I can't knock that.
And the thing is, I was kind of torn with Rod Woodson. The only reason I went with Rod Woodson, he was the number 1 guy with this 8V stat. And I'm like, he doesn't have a Super Bowl with the Steelers, but he does have a Super Bowl at least. So that's why I was torn. You really want to know why I went with, I'll be honest with you, I went with Rod Woodson at number 5 because I couldn't decide between him and Lambert. I couldn't.
Yeah, and rightfully so. You erred on the guy that you actually watched, which makes sense. And like John Trent said, John Trent kicked me and knocked me, and I accepted. He said, you can have all the production you want, but did you win? What did all that production get, AB? Nothing. Wow, you leave so many greats off the list at number 1 because of value. Wow. Not just value, but also because he was
really good.
Player. He was a great player.
Yeah.
He's the best wide receiver in the organization's history, and you've got multiple Hall of Famers at the position, in my opinion. AB was a dominant player. Revisionist history, because of all the, antics, you might forget that, but he was great. So in terms of value picks, so I asked my dad. So my dad gave me a couple of different categories. He cited Donnie Shell, and we talked about this before the program, as the best undrafted selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Absolutely. Donnie Shell, everybody else. They've had some really good ones. And like you and I were talking right before we came on the air, I don't really count James Harrison because he wasn't picked up as that undrafted free agent by the Steelers initially. Other people might count him, and I'm okay with that. But personally, I know he was really good with that category. But come on. Donnie Shell was the standard of an undrafted free agent. And that's when they had 12 rounds back then. And he didn't get drafted.
Value picks, my dad, along with AB, he listed AB as his number 1 most valuable pick. If you're looking at value, I'd still go Webster, but his AB's number right 2. I'm gonna give you his number 2 on that list because he didn't put Webster he had Webster in his top 5.
Yeah, he didn't.
He had Webster at 5, so he put AB at 1. Who do you think was his number 2 pick? It's a linebacker.
Value. My goodness, drafted by the Steelers. Well, I think of Vince Williams as the 6th round pick, but I don't think that's it.
No, it's not.
Where was? No, I'm trying to think of someone who was drafted low. I really can't think of it.
Avoid Lloyd.
Well, I was going to say Lloyd, but I couldn't remember how high he was drafted.
I believe he was drafted in the 6th round. Greg Lloyd.
Yeah, I was thinking he was more like a 3rd round guy.
Avoid Lloyd. And that just shows you how many great players the Steelers have. I had a great time doing this show. Is there anything before we get out of here, Dave, you want to tease for the rest of the week?
Well, well, first of all, let's say retrospect. If you haven't gone to our YouTube channel and checked it out, we had the exclusive interview with Chris Wormley Monday night that Michael Beck, that's the new deputy editor of Behind the Steel Curtain, who you'll be able to see on the podcast. Tomorrow night, he'll be on the preview with Brian and myself. You might see him pretty soon on here with Lance as well. He's part of the rotation as we try to figure this stuff out. But he was the one who reached out and was able to land that interview. And it was that. So if you haven't checked that out, you've got to go back and check that out. Tomorrow night, we've got the preview. Lance is ready for, I said it on Friday.
Yeah, it's going to be a doozy. It's going to be a doozy.
We've got Tony's brunch with, Steelers brunch with Tony on Saturday. You and Bad on Sunday, Homer and Hater. I'm really enjoying that with Bad as the Homer and you as the Hater. That's a good one. And Brian and Tony on Mondays, and with the Q&A, and my brother Rich and I on Stat Geek on Tuesdays. And if we happen to land any other special guests, those will probably most likely be bonus shows, just an extra show thrown in, or it could even be in place of a show for a week. Like if something happens where there's a player that could come on, it might be on in place of the preview or something like that. So we'll just kind of see how it rolls. We're kind of open and ready to, I mean, the Wormley thing happened pretty fast. It was like a 24-hour thing. So,
and that's the thing with interviews. You got to be really flexible because you're operating on their time, and kind of like whenever they want to do the interview, you just have to be available to do the interview. I think Mike did a great job in getting that interview. Again, like Dave said, make sure you guys check out that interview. But with that, we are going to go ahead and get out of here. I hope you like the sugar-free Cool Whip show, the low-calorie guilty pleasure show, because this is the type of shows we need in the summer. And I hope it just strikes some conversation from you when you're talking to Steeler fans. You guys can create your top 5 lists. In fact, when the show is posted up on the website, make sure you go to the website and post your top 5 lists. And maybe we'll jump into and revisit it and look at some of you guys' top 5 lists, because this is a great conversation piece. But with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude the show. And as always, tune in, tell a friend, and subscribe.